The first film co-produced by the pursuer Yanbian war god Mian Zhenghe and the thousand-faced actor He Zhengyu, does not have overly exaggerated acting agreements. The film is extremely realistic and shows us the oppression from the two emperors. The first collaboration between the two won countless awards, with a terrifying 8.2 rating. After watching it, I couldn't recall it for a long time. For the first time, it made me think of a person's surrender because Lao He's crime technique is extremely cruel. After killing a person, he directly dismembers the body, immerses his head in a fish tank for fish, and when chopping, his limbs are thrown into the courtyard. His appetite is even his own nephew. I won't let it go either. The beginning of the story also starts with a plot. The male protagonist, who was originally a criminal police officer, was fired from the bureau due to recruitment. However, the fired old man did not change his habit of liking women. Instead, he became a brothel and raised a bunch of young ladies under his command, ready for emergencies. When there is no customer base, it benefits oneself. When there is a customer base, let them help him make money, and his childhood can be described as thriving. However, as soon as the 9 to 5 days began to improve, the young lady under my command frequently disappeared. The elderly didn't take it seriously, so they thought they were just running away and continuing to act like their boss, delivering these human flesh money trees to customers. But on that day, a phone call broke the original bottleneck. The elderly subordinate on the phone, Pighead, said, "A customer always thinks that the young lady is not good and wants to change people, but now there is only one lucky man who is still suffering from a cold who cannot go out to pick up business." The helpless old man can only personally call the other person to inquire about what is going on, why they catch a cold in the summer, and whether they should also run away like others, forcing them to start work today, otherwise he will go to his house to find him. Upon hearing this, Funan reluctantly agreed to the elderly, saying that he would tidy up and go pick up guests. The elderly person who heard the news also hung up the phone, but as soon as he threw it away, the phone fell into the crevice of the seat and had to bend down to pick it up. Unexpectedly, what he wanted to pick up was the phone of a young lady who had already escaped. Curious, Lao Mian took the phone back to the office and took the already charged phone to flip through a few steps, wanting to see who the last call was made to before the other person escaped. At this moment, a number ending in 4885 caught the old man's attention because he felt like he had seen this number somewhere before. So he took out the service list of his subordinates and looked through it. After some searching, he found that the last order of several escaped ladies was for this service number. After realizing something was amiss, the old man quickly called Funan and asked her where she was now, whether she was in the customer's car. He then said to let Funan go to the other person's house and send her a detailed address in the restroom, warning Funan not to mess it up, otherwise she would be dead. After finishing speaking, Lao Mian rushed out with the gloves she had left behind when she was a criminal police officer. Funan, who hung up the phone on this side, was driving in the car at the moment. Lao He beside him asked him who called, and Funan found an excuse to avoid it. Then, under Lao He's guidance, he came to the other person's door. Funan also secretly noted down the house number where the house was located, looking at how Lao He was used one after another, and at the house wrapped in dense forests. Funan felt a strong sense of unease filling his mind. But in the end, he was invited by Lao He to enter this suffocating house. In order to edit the exciting plot, I specially changed my phone to a new one. After comparing my old phone with the professional and reliable listed company Love Recycling, I found that Love Recycling has a high price. There are 2,000 stores across the country, all in large shopping malls, and orders can also be placed. Engineers can come to collect the phone and make on-site payments. In short, for second-hand recycling, please identify the listed company and follow the recycling process. The elderly person in the car here also called the former head of the criminal police team, Xu Zhen, and said that he had reported to him about the disappearance of the young ladies before. Now he found out that they were not missing, but were sold because the young ladies were all taught by the same man. Now he is rushing to the other party's lookout and asking if Xu Zhen can help to catch that man together. However, Xu Zhen is also very busy here because he is protecting the mayor's patrol. However, as soon as his gaze shifted for less than 2 seconds, he saw the mayor's face being dragged down by the crowd, which frightened the tree roots and quickly led their subordinates to maintain public order. After Funan entered the door, he began to look around. There were fresh signs of breaking ground in Ingson's yard, and the branches and vines around it had not been pruned for a long time. In the end, with a hint of unease, he closed the door to the living room. After entering the door, Funan used the excuse of going to the bathroom to take a shower, in order to better serve his wife later on. But Lao He didn't even think about it and agreed directly, pointing to Funan's location. Funan, who arrived at the bathroom, immediately turned on the water from the bathroom heater and sat on the side, wanting to send a text message to the elderly to provide location information. Unexpectedly, the message failed and there was no signal in the entire bathroom. Not giving up, Funan went straight to the window and wanted to try again, but the result was still the same. He even begged angrily and smashed the window open, but outside the window was a thick solid brick wall. Realizing something was wrong, Funan began to look around, only to see a remnant of human scalp tissue in the bathtub. In this scene, Funan quickly covered his mouth, afraid to make a single sound, and had to endure his fear to organize his own state, making it seem like he had discovered something. When he arrived at the living room, he saw that Lao He was still watching TV. Hunan said that his protective measures had fallen on the car and he wanted to go out and get them. Lao He turned his head and said a good word, then looked at the TV on his own, but his eyes were not at all idle. After hearing the commotion, he sneered disdainfully. Sure enough, Funan discovered that the door to go out had been locked tightly by Lao He. This scene also made Funan's heart cool to the bottom. Meanwhile, the old lady outside was still foolishly waiting for Funan to send a message, but after waiting for a long time, her phone had no motivation, so she directly called Funan. But what came through the phone was a busy tone that couldn't be connected. Old Mian, who didn't believe in evil, directly called Lao He with the ending number 4885, but it also became impossible to connect, and Funan's side was in dire straits. At this point, he was already bound with both hands and feet, and his whole body was restrained, lying on the ground. Lao He walked up to him with a bag of tools and put it down. He first hung the hook on the iron bolt, then squatted in front of Funan and asked him if he knew Tsuehua as his colleague. He had cut off his tongue just because he was shouting, and then pulled off the cloth strip from Funan's mouth. Sure enough, upon hearing these words, Funan dared not even speak out loud. It gives people a feeling of hope and despair, which is frustrating and very enjoyable. Holding a hammer, he was about to stare at Funan's head, but when he was about to stare, Funan went to twist his cards, causing Funan to scream wildly on the ground. Helpless, Lao He could only frown and once again wanted to open up space for Funan, but he still managed to empty it and smashed the floor. On the third attempt, he injured his own hand. Angry and frustrated, Lao He didn't want to play this game and directly smashed Funan's head with a hammer. At this moment, the doorbell outside did ring. Upon checking outside, I found a middle-aged couple. It turned out that they were looking for a house, but the original owner, Lao He, heard this and pushed them out of the door, saying that there was no one there. Closed the door and let the two of them hide quickly, but the man outside the door talked a lot of nonsense. Lao He directly invited the two of them into the house and left them to dry, while he went to fetch a hammer and walked up to them before sending them away. Seeing the original owner of the house, holding their keys, they arrived at each other's car and wanted to throw it away. However, shortly after driving, they collided with a car that was about to turn in an alley. The owner of the car was none other than an old man from Hunan who was searching everywhere for him. Lao Mian, who encountered this scene, was also so angry that he cursed loudly. He didn't know if he hadn't looked at the almanac when he went out, but he could have crashed into a car because the old man at this time didn't even know that the person in the other person's car was the man named Zhua Funan. After getting off the car and looking at the other person's car, it was not cheap. The old man had to go through insurance, so he asked Lao He to roll down the car window and give him a phone number so that he could go through insurance. Lao He said it was okay and allowed the elderly to leave. He didn't pursue it, but the elderly were afraid of future trouble and insisted that Lao He give him a phone number. Just as Lao He said he didn't need it again, the old man saw the blood stains on Lao He's clothes. At this moment, Lao Mian also realized something was wrong and began to ask for the phone again. However, Lao He ignored it and retreated towards the back. But at this moment, a car followed suit again, and helplessly, Lao He could only let the other party grind it a bit. Lao Mian picked up her phone and dialed the number 4885, but it really started ringing. Seeing this, Lao Mian is also out of breath and is about to go up and catch Lao He. However, Lao He cunningly escaped from the co-pilot seat, and the two of them chased each other in this narrow alley. Lao Mian also desperately chased after Lao He, but such a high-intensity sprint made even the blogger gasp for breath, let alone the two small movie stars. Only the audience in front of the screen could bear such a high load of intense exercise. So in no time, the old man caught hold of Lao He and gave him a fierce beating, punching his face with his fists, kicking his face with his feet, and fiercely kicking him in the face with each foot. After finishing the fight, he held on to the electric pole and asked Lao He where he had sold all his ladies. Then he dug out his ID card from Lao He, only to find that there was no exact address on it. The helpless old man could only handcuff Lao He and bring him back to his own home. But I never thought that the small alley just now was so blocked that even the traffic police came. Saying that his car couldn't stop like this, and then seeing Lao He, the co-pilot, and the handcuffs on his hands, the traffic police thought that Lao Mian was also a police officer and asked him which area he worked in, but Lao Mian couldn't answer, so he was dragged into the police car. Lao Mian can only explain that 2 years ago he was still a criminal police officer in the mobile search team, but he just resigned, and Lao He even sold his young lady. Now that we can't even catch the bad guys, can't we? After arriving at the police station, the police asked Lao He to write about the bloodthirsty manager and then leaned the elderly person against the seat. The elderly also called their former head of the criminal police team, Xu Zhen, to come quickly. At this moment, the police also asked Lao He whose car he was driving, but Lao He didn't know either. He could only say that it was the car of someone he knew. Upon hearing this, the police realized something was wrong and asked Lao He who he was, but he couldn't even say his name. The police in the uprising asked Lao He if he had really memorized the memories of his elderly subordinates. Upon hearing this, the police officer became confused and looked at his wife with an incredulous expression on his face. At this moment, Lao Mian's eldest tree root came and said that he was a member of the mobile search criminal police team and wanted to take Lao He away. He immediately took Lao He into the car, but when he came out of his old age, he found that the car he was driving was pulled to the entrance of the police station and the door was not locked. After looking around for no one, he decided to sit on it and start searching around. Unexpectedly, he picked up a string of keys from the ground and tried to find the old man in Funan. He tried the door lock everywhere, but it didn't match. So he called his younger brother, Pighead, and asked him to start searching for houses along the street until the lock was locked. He also focused on finding the basement. And the phone has no signal, so the helpless pig can only listen. Mr. Zhao, who was taken to the police station, was asked by the tree root rope about how he killed those people. Lao He said it was using a chisel. He pinched his neck and used a knife, but they were in too much pain. He had seen pigs being slaughtered before, and that's how they handled livestock. When he heard the tree roots here, he fell silent and asked, and then hung up the roots of the body to dry the blood. Otherwise, the body was too heavy to move. After leaving it for a day, the body was inspected and the tree roots were buried. He asked where Lao He was buried. It's impossible that all 9 people killed were buried in the front yard because according to the tree roots, there were 9 missing people there. However, Lao He said that these were not 9, but 12. When Lao Mian arrived at the police station again, he asked Xu Zhen if he wanted to go to Funan's house with him. However, Xu Zhen said he wanted Lao Mian to go with another forensic doctor because he needed to check if the blood on Lao He's body was consistent with Hunan's DNA. Upon hearing this, Lao Mian said, how could this useless tree root possibly kill someone? He just sold all his young ladies and hid them at most now. After searching around, he woke up and looked at his wife who was still eating. Lao Mian wanted to give her 2 bites, but was still stopped. Helpless, Lao Mian had to choose to go to Funan's house. Under the guidance of the pig's head, Lao Mian also brought the forensic doctor to the outside of Funan's room. After the forensic doctor knocked on the door, there was no response and he asked if anyone was there. When Lao Mian saw this, he said, "Of course there's no one left." He then smashed the glass with his elbow and when he was opening the door, he found that there was actually a child inside. This scene also startled Lao Mian. After cursing a few words, she went to the room and asked who the little girl was. It wasn't until she saw a photo of him and Funan in the refrigerator that she realized she was Funan's daughter. Immediately, the forensic doctor searched the room for objects that could recognize Funan's low thunder. Just as he was about to leave, he looked at the little girl in the room who was still unaware of what had happened. Lao Mian also felt compassion and took the little girl away. During dinner, the little girl asked the elderly where her mother had gone and why she had to take away her hair. Old age can only be said to go to work, but a little girl who is small and big is obviously not easy to deceive, so she asked if old age wants to use her hair for sex. The old man didn't know how to get back to the little girl when he heard this, so he planned to take her with him first. When he got into the car, he started smoking, but when he threw his cigarette butt, it flew into the seat through the back window. Seeing this, the old man quickly asked the little girl to help throw cigarette butts, but it was too late. The leather seat had already been burned with a scar, which made Lao Mian stomp her feet in anger. She said why it was so beautiful today, and the old man who wanted to vent his anger went to the address on Lao He's ID card. After arriving at the location, there was a couple inside. The woman is Lao He's biological sister. The old man wanted to ask if he knew where Lao He lived, but the woman said he didn't know either. They hadn't seen Lao He for a long time, and he had been in prison before. Seeing this, Lao He didn't want to say much, so he began to explain the purpose of his trip. Originally, Lao He came to find 2 people to help his younger brother repay the money. He said that each of his young ladies had prepaid 20 million yuan, but now Lao He has sold all of his young ladies. After speaking, he took out a document and asked the 2 people to personally help Lao He repay the money. The 2 of them were also a bit confused by Lao Mian's operation. At this moment, there was a slight movement in the corner nearby. Lao Mian followed and saw a little boy with scars all over his head, his entire head being injured by blunt objects. The terrifying scars were so shocking. Lao Mian saw this and drove away directly. It turned out that the scar on the little boy's head was caused by his uncle, who was also Lao He. At this moment, Lao Mian's gaze was also dull, as if she couldn't believe that Lao He would hit a child so hard, and the other person was still his own nephew. At this moment, Lao Mian also knew that Fu Nan Duo was really unlucky. Even when his daughter spoke, Lao Mian never regained consciousness. And inside the police station here, the director personally began questioning Lao He, asking him if he had ever killed anyone. But at this moment, Lao He retracted his confession and refused to confess a single word. Seeing this, the director had no choice but to take advantage of the other party. However, he knew that Lao He must have killed someone, otherwise it would not be possible to describe it so clearly. So he asked his subordinates to take the root of the tree to dig up the corpses. Lao He couldn't bury all 12 corpses at the door. After some analysis, several people targeted the only mountain in the area, so their subordinates and police officers dug up the tree roots. However, they peeled off the entire mountain all night and did not find any useful clues. But on Lao Mian's side, she found a little sister under her command who had also taken Lao He's class. So she started talking to Lao He, saying that Lao He was not born with male merits, and that he could only drool all night and do nothing. Then he left the next day. But since then, Lao He has been constantly making phone calls to harass him, sending him various dog-licking voice messages, and various bloody photos, saying that if he is not with him, he will be killed, and women will treat him as a lunatic and directly blackmail Lao He. The elderly who heard this knew they couldn't get any useful clues, so they turned around and left directly. The little girl in the car heard the conversation between the two and burst into tears. At this moment, the young man also knew that his mother was encountering the sea. The pig head who was trying the keys here tried one house after another, and finally found the point corresponding to one of the keys. Lao Mian quickly drove to the scene and, guided by the pig's head, arrived at a house. However, upon entering, the old man realized that something was wrong. Although it was in the basement, the signal inside was full, unlike before when he called without any signal. Lao Mian knew he had found the wrong place and was about to turn around and leave. Just as he was leaving, he met the man Zheng Yu was returning home. Watching Lao Mian come out of his house, the man ran away without saying a word. This scene left Lao Mian stunned. He didn't understand why the man was running, but he still called out to Pighead and chased after him. The two of them chased each other all the way, but fortunately, Pighead used his body to attract the man's attention. Then, Lao Mian kicked and fell to the ground from behind, letting Pighead watch the little girl in the car. He then took the man back to the place where he had just been. Originally, the man thought that Lao Mian and his wife were here to pursue debts, so he saw Lao Mian running away from his doorstep. Lao Mian ignored it and kicked the man one foot after another, asking him where he lived. The man quickly begged for mercy, saying that he really didn't know they were in prison at the same time. After coming out, Lao He said he had nowhere to go and lived with him. The last time we met was when Lao He came back to take his toolkit. Upon hearing this, Lao Mian asked what kind of toolkit it was. The man didn't hide it and said it was an ordinary toolkit, containing various tools such as axes, chisels, hammers, and knives. Upon hearing this, the old man stood up and looked around. After opening the wallpaper, he found that they were all huge wall bones, each resembling a mystery on a giant's body. And here, Lao He was also asked by an old psychological counselor. First, he asked some irrelevant questions, and then he asked if Lao He had a girlfriend and if he had slept with anyone. But Lao He smiled and remained silent. The man wanted to stop asking when he saw this, but Lao He asked the man why he wanted to know. The man said, because people like him are like this, they all lack the ability to spread seeds as men. Then he spoke a bunch of words criticizing Lao He, and finally chose to use a chisel to smash the other person's head, as if exercising a man's ability, allowing Lao He to enjoy it very much. Upon hearing this, Lao He also became angry and embarrassed, standing up to kill the man. Fortunately, he was stopped by a group of police officers. But the old man who came out here found that the little girl was missing. It turned out that just as the old man was pulling the man away, the little girl saw a back that looked very similar to her mother, a man, so she followed him up. At this moment, Lao Mian saw that the little girl was missing and quickly woke up the pig's head. The pig's head also looked confused. Helpless, Lao Mian could only start searching everywhere, but by the time she found the little girl, she was already lying on the ground on the brink of death. She quickly carried her to the hospital, but fortunately, her injuries stabilized in the end. Looking at the lonely and helpless little girl, angry Lao Mian ignored her and ran red lights all the way to the police station. Capturing Lao He was like a violent assault, forcing him to reveal the location of Hunan. And the female police officer who saw this scene did not make any resistance, but let the elderly fight her hard. Upon hearing the commotion, the police officers who rushed over also tacitly did not go in to stop the elderly, because no evidence could be found before 12 o'clock today, so Lao He would be acquitted. So everyone listened to the elderly's rampage towards Lao He outside the door. After driving 3 rounds, the elderly came out with tree roots wanting to ask what to do, but Lao Mian left directly. The female police officer who came out quickly received instructions from Lao He that she was at 8931 Wangyuan Cave. But what everyone didn't know was that Funan didn't actually die, but went into a coma. Upon waking up, Funan picked up the broken tiles on the ground and began to sing. The police station on this side also began to rush towards the place that Lao He had mentioned, mobilizing all the resources of the entire police station and starting to excavate. Even if the entire cemetery is overturned, no useful clues can be found. At this point, Lao Mian also knew that the other party was satisfied and obviously procrastinated. He told the tree root that it was not here, and then analyzed the disappearance of Hunan on the map. The distance from here was more than 20 kilometers, and they should go to explore the surrounding area where Hunan disappeared. Before, Lao He was just talking nonsense, but the tree roots clearly didn't believe in the words of the elderly. And the police chief here is also feeling a lot of pressure, because it is about to arrive at 12 noon. If no evidence is found, Lao He will be acquitted, and the master wants to secretly transfer Lao He, but coincidentally, it turned into a book. This scene happened to be seen by a prosecutor. Seeing how badly Lao He was beaten, he thought the director and his team were trying to make a move, so he asked the director to immediately release Lao He and catch the person who did it. As the screen turned, the tree root who received the message told Lao Mian that it was best for him to leave quickly. However, Lao Mian didn't know what was going on and thought it was the tree root who was going to drive him away. So he began to pick up a hammer and wave it at the crowd, asking them what was going on. The tree root then said that the director wanted to catch him back because Lao Mian had beaten Lao He too badly. Of course, Lao Mian didn't want to be caught and turned around to run outside, but was still knocked down by a group of police officers. Finally, he put on handcuffs and dragged into the police force. When in the car, Lao Mian began to get close to several police officers because they were all colleagues before. They even deliberately used words to stimulate the driver and kicked him directly in the back seat, causing him to lose control of the direction. He collided with a tree and after several struggles, he threw several police officers behind him. He even threatened to have a standing police officer open the handcuffs for him, but the police did so because they all knew what Lao Mian was going to do. After removing the handcuffs, Lao Mian began to run frantically towards the area where Lao He was located, and Lao He here was also released because he had no evidence of killing him for 24 hours. However, the police were not vegetarians, so they followed Lao He all the way. Meanwhile, Funan, who was lying on the ground, also cut the rope with the tiles on the ground, untied the restraints on his body, and began to flee towards the outside, smashing the window and jumping down. Just as he jumped down, he saw the dog nibbling on something. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a broken hand. But Funan, who had experienced death, also saw that he ran directly towards the outside, but when he came to the street, there was no one there. Fortunately, in the end, he ran to a convenience store and picked up the phone, starting to call Lao Mian. However, the old man was very anxious and didn't even notice the sound of the phone in his pocket. And Lao He on this side also got off the bus and started rushing towards his own home, while the female police officer behind him also kept following him. At this point, Lao He still wanted to smoke a cigarette, but found that there was no more, so he went to a convenience store to buy a box. As she watched Lao He enter, the landlady trembled and walked in front of him, asking what was wrong with Lao He's face. Why did Lao He say he was hit by a crazy person? Hi, the landlady just said, why are there so many crazy people around here? Upon hearing this, Lao He wanted to leave, but the landlady called out to him, saying that the woman was still here. Hearing this, Lao He couldn't calm down and began to look at the glass door. He decided not to leave either. Today, the female police officers outside are also afraid to approach, thinking that Lao He is just buying something and doesn't know what he is doing inside. And inside, Lao He had already dealt with the woman, and then he saw Funan sitting against the wall. At this moment, Funan was so scared that he could only pretend to be dead. As Lao He approached, he immediately noticed that his trembling hands were like epilepsy. Upon seeing this, Lao He questioned how Funan escaped. Fearless Funan could only lean against the wall and sob, but Lao He had no intention of letting him go. He then hammered Funan's head and completely killed him alive. And Lao Mian on this side couldn't run at this moment. While resting, he quickly rode past a few police cars. Old Mian, who had noticed something wrong, quickly approached to check the situation. When she arrived at the destination, she found that the police were already surrounded, and the female police officer sat on the ground crying. Lao Mian can only look at you from the window, wanting the tree roots inside to tell him if the deceased is Funan. But even the tree roots dare not tell the unfortunate news to the elderly, because the scene is too cruel. The whole person in Hunan has been cut into hostages, and his head and limbs have been soaked in the fish tank by Lao He. This daytime killing and dismemberment incident instantly spread like a virus in the local area, reaching a speed of 4 meters. The pressure on the police station also reached an unprecedented peak, using all available clues. Because they knew that Lao He was a heinous criminal, and every second of delay could potentially cause the death of another innocent citizen. And by now, it had started pouring rain outside, and Lao He had also started digging pits and burying the bodies inside. And on Lao Mian's side, after the police had dispersed, he arrived at the room that was like a hell of a shura during the day. He picked up his phone and made a call, which was clearly filled with Funan's message. Ha ha ha. After hanging up the phone, the elderly person sat alone in the room, and anyone passing by would be seen by him as the old man. It seems that killing Lao He has become his obsession now. Now Lao Mian only wants his soul to be redeemed. For the first time, he had the idea of wanting God to save him, so he came to the church door and looked at the cross of Jesus in Nuoda. But as he looked at his old age, he realized something was wrong, and the scene felt a bit familiar. The image marks on the cross reminded him of the place in the room where Lao He had stayed before, which seemed to be the various body groups on this cross. Therefore, the old man came to the church with a dead horse attitude and asked the priest if he knew the man in the photo. Fortunately, the priest really knows Lao He. He said he works at a construction site and recently helped to crack the church. He made the cross and gave Lao He his address. He went to the old man's small secret door outside the door, but hesitated and chose to give up. He picked up the key that Lao He had left in his hand before and started trying it out. After trying a few times, Lao Mian finally opened it up. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Lao He about to run away. The old man, whose anger was burning, grabbed Lao He's hair and dragged it into the room. When he came in, he hugged Lao He and the two of them got into a fight. However, Lao He was clearly not a match for the old man, and he was quickly stepped on by the old man. Seeing that Lao He was about to die, the old man also let go of his feet because he couldn't let him die so easily. Then the elderly began to privately scrutinize, only to coincidentally see Funan in the fish tank. But at this moment, Funan only has one head lying inside. This scene also stunned Lao Mian, who was about to turn around and look for him. However, as soon as he turned around, he hit him on the head with a stick, and he began to violently fight against Lao Mian on the ground. The two of them also fought back and forth. However, Lao Mian's strength clearly declined due to being unified in the legs and being hit with a few sticks, so he took the lead and became the weaker side. Soon, Lao He rode under him and crazily threw a bottle at the old man's head. Fortunately, the hammer that fell on the side was touched by the old man, and Lao He, who was only focused on smashing the old man to death, did not notice this abnormality. So he was directly knocked on the head by the old man. When he got up, he found that Lao He was unconscious and wanted to give him a final blow. At this moment, the police arrived, but Lao He still wanted to personally cut this scumbag, but the tree root did not let Lao He carry this tree, so he stopped Lao Mian. Subsequently, a large number of police resources were invested in Lao He's courtyard, and a massive frog-like operation was launched in front of the air. Countless corpses were excavated in a row, all of which were broken limbs and pens. The last old sleep also arrived at the hospital and sat next to Funan's daughter. The story ends here.